So this is part 2 of an ongoing series of videos that I'm doing here on my Raw Select Music channel. If you want to find out the guidelines of how I'm going about doing this project, please go back and watch my original video where I explain my intentions for this ongoing video series. But with all that being said, Squarepusher, Hard Normal Daddy. Let's talk about this guy. What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music. Today I want to talk about this album right here. This is Squarepusher's Hard Normal Daddy, released on Warp Records in 1997. Widely considered by most people to be Squarepusher's finest hour by both fans and critics alike. Today I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions of this record with you guys and let you know whether or not my own feelings on this record match up with what everybody else has to say about this fine Squarepusher project. So with all that being said, let's talk about this guy. So after generating some buzz with the release of his debut album, Tom Jenkinson, aka Squarepusher, quickly followed up Feed Me Weird Things with Hard Normal Daddy in less than a year, with Feed Me Weird Things coming out on June 3rd in 96, and Hard Normal Daddy coming out on April 28th in 97, according to Wikipedia. This would be his first full-length project for the legendary electronic music label Warp Records, but it wouldn't be his first project as the Port Rhombus EP actually came out the year prior. So for a lot of reviews that I've seen, this album is often compared to jazz fusion icons Weather Report. But in an interview for Red Bull Music Academy in 2012, he said that he took most of his inspiration from the likes of Herbie Hancock's Death Wish soundtrack and TV Funk. Whatever the case may be, it seems like he struck gold with the formula he used on this album, and Hard Normal Daddy to this day is probably his most critically acclaimed album, with it receiving a 5-star review on allmusic.com and Pitchfork putting it at number 24 on their list of the 50 best IDM albums of all time. But where does it fit for me in all of this? For one thing, I really do feel like this is sort of an extension of the sound that he created for himself with Feed Me Weird Things. So much so that the first 5 tracks on this album kind of feel like direct sequels to a lot of the songs on there. Cooper's World feels like a follow-up to Squarepusher's theme. Beep Street feels a lot like Tundra without so much of the haunting atmosphere, but still being fairly ambient in nature. And Rustic Raver and Chin Hippie really going in on that harsh, cacophonous, abrasive sound that he showed off on tracks like Demotane Corporation and The Swifty. But the main difference between the tracks here and the songs on Feed Me Weird Things, on that album it really felt like he was still playing around with the different moving parts of his sound, and here it feels like there's a much more concentrated, concerted, deliberate effort going on. And it really feels like it's not spastic just for spastic's sake. And it feels like the ideas that he explored on that first project are all really coming together to create the signature sound that people both love and hate when it comes to Squarepusher. Now, for me personally, I really love this sound. And the fact that he has spent so much more time in just making his songs feel so much stronger, whether it's in the production, the songwriting, the overall texture, the compositions. Everything on this record feels like Feed Me Weird Things just made that much better. And where the album really seems to come together for me are on the 2 epics that are placed square in the middle of the album. Papillon and E8 Boogie both feel like almost mini drum and bass jazz fusion epics. There's a strong sense of funk and groove. His bass playing is just as spastic as ever, but it really feels like it's more in service of the actual composition of the song rather than just showing off his chops, which he still shows off in spades for sure, but it really does feel like there's a sense that he's trying to hold himself back a little bit more and actually make his virtuoso bass playing a part of the composition rather than just showing off for everyone or something like that. In compositionally, these songs are just so interesting. Tons of jazzy keys and synths, breakneck, drill and bass, amens, and drum samples, and just layers of melody and instrumentation all come together to create these just compositionally fantastic fantastic tracks that quickly become the highlights of this album. And following that, you've got tracks like Fat Controller, which feels like almost a throwback big beat style hip-hop track, complete with some rather elementary scratching, but it really just gives the sense that Squarepusher's going for this really authentic hip-hop track, and it was often the song that I would play for people when I would say Squarepusher isn't all just chaotic noise, he's actually capable of making just a straight-up head nodder. And for me, for the longest time, when I heard this album all the way back in the early 2000s, it was an immediate standout track, and it's still one of my favorites to this day. Vic Acid is just a straight-up drill and bass burner of a track with some of the meanest sounding bass on the entire album, as well as just this overall feeling of raw aggression that you would associate with some of the best drum and bass tracks all done in that Squarepusher sound. Male Pill Part 13 feels like a combination of Beep Street and Papillon mixed together for this one final epic that closes everything out. You get the jazzy sounds as well as the synth-laden atmosphere of Beep Street mixed together for what is just an absolute blissful listen. And a late album highlight for me, Rat P's and Q's, has this beautiful, frantic, unnerving tension between the strings, the synths, the bass, the drums, and compositionally is easily one of the most engaging tracks that I think Squarepusher has ever made. And it definitely closes the album out on a high note, but it feels like all of that goodwill and energy gets deflated slightly by Rebus, which is just kind of a throwaway IDM track that's not really all that interesting. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's got some atmosphere. It's got some cool little glitchy drum textures to it. But in all honesty, I feel like it's the weakest track on here, along with Analog D9, which is an interlude that pops up early on in the album, and it's just kind of fine. It really doesn't do anything. Overall, this is in my top 5 favorite Squarepusher projects. This album is consistently good to excellent all the way across the board. I love all the jazz fusion and funk elements that he worked into his IDM, electronic music, drill and bass sound. And I really feel like as a composer and a producer, this is really Squarepusher at the top of his game. This is most definitely the album that I would recommend everyone listen to either before or after Feed Me Weird Things. If you're looking for any album to listen to as a starting point to get into Squarepusher's music, Hard Normal Daddy is easily the best album to start with. I wish it still had a little bit of that raw, unpolished grittiness that Feed Me Weird Things has, but nonetheless, it still doesn't take away from what is an excellent Squarepusher project. And with all that being said, we gotta get to that tier list. So I think that this album is going to go in the S tier category. So yeah, I gotta say, I think I kind of agree with everyone. If I were to point to one album from Squarepusher's catalog, this would probably be not only his critically most acclaimed album, but it's honestly just across the board his best project from his early period. But all that being said, this would be the last of Squarepusher's extremely accessible projects, because the project after this, this is where things are gonna get spicy. But until then, so that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've listened to this album for yourself, please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you want to hear this project for yourself, please head over to my WordPress blog, because that's where I'll be posting music links to any of the records and albums that I talk about on this channel. Also, make sure you're here on Sundays for Live from the Record Room, my DJ music live streams where I share records in my collection that I talk about on this channel, as well as a whole host of music that I don't get a chance to talk about on this channel. And make sure you follow me on Twitter, because there you can quickly find out what time I will be going live. Links to everything, as always, down in the description. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!